All right, we are going to start with 8th grade lesson 1.01 and 1.02. This session is being recorded, so I need you guys to make sure that you are staying focused and that the chat is related to the class and that you're here to learn. During different times of the live lesson, I will turn off the chat just to make sure that you guys are focused. If you have questions, you can always ask questions at the end. If you need additional help, you can always wait till the end and I can help you. Okay, any questions before we get started? Okay, another thing is the computer connection. I've had a couple live lessons already today. My computer connection is fine. If you have problems and yours logs out or you can't hear me or you can't see the information on the screen, your best bet is probably to log out and log back in. Okay. If I cut out though, just let me know, put it in the chat. I'll try to turn up the volume or do something on my end to make it better. So make sure that you just communicate with me and help me out with that for live lessons. Give me a smiley face if this is your first live lesson and you're new to Lee Virtual. So smiley face is this is your first live lesson and you're new to Lee Virtual. Welcome. We are glad that you are here. Thank you for coming. I have a lot of kids that have been with me for a couple of years, so they may help you out. And my kiddos that were with me last year and also in 6th grade, you can help out with some questions, so they might chime in too. Okay, we're glad that you guys are here. This is a really good group. My 8th graders are awesome, so I expect we'll do very well. Just make sure that we stay focused and stay on task. Now, our live lessons will always be on Mondays at 1 o'clock. This does not count as a DBA. No, this is not a live lesson DBA. This is just a live lesson. Okay, so you're here to participate. You do get points for participating. Always at 1 o'clock on Mondays, yes. There are a couple of Mondays in September that we don't have school. I'll send out a recording. Okay, that way you will have some information because it's nice to go over what's going on for the week. Now, some of you have already finished these lessons. If you want to stay and review, that's great. It's up to you. Okay, so let's get started, as I know you guys are busy and you have a lot going on. So 1.01. If you look at the second page of lesson 1.01, you'll see objectives. And it says at the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify comparisons in text, identify the purpose of text comparisons, and define and identify analogies. What I want you guys to do is to take your objectives and turn those into questions. As 8th graders, you guys really need to be working on being independent and taking notes. Fino, I'll answer in a minute, please, okay? So you guys need to be working on being independent and taking notes. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your objectives, not just in language arts, but in all your classes, and turn those into questions. So how would you rephrase these objectives into a question? So for the first one, identify comparisons in text. How do you turn that into a question? And you can put that in the chat box. Good job, Daisy. How do you identify comparisons in text? Good job, Joey. Good job, Daisy. So at your notes, when you're taking your notes, and again, you guys, you should go back and reread 1.01 after we're done with this and go through and take your notes. Now, some of you have already done that, so that's fine. But at the top of your notes, it should say 1.01, and then you should have the 3 objectives turned into questions. So, how do you identify comparisons in text? How do I identify the purpose of text comparisons? And what do I do to define and identify analogies? Fino, that's fine. They're not due until Friday. 1.01 and 1.02 are due on Friday. This is a preview of the work for this week. So I'm going over the information for you, and we're kind of previewing, but I still expect you to go back to the lessons. So right now we're talking about what notes you should be taking. And for 1.01, when you go and do it, and I know someone asked about taking notes, you don't need to take notes necessarily on the live lesson. You can jot down information, but when you go back and read the lesson on your own, you should definitely be taking notes. And what I want you to do is I want you to take the objectives and turn those into questions, because yes, those are like your guided notes. So you are reading to find out how to identify comparisons in text, how to identify the purpose of text comparisons, and how to define and identify analogies. Okay, so that's what you're reading for in 1.01. How do we feel about that? Thumbs up if you understand how to turn an objective into a question. Thumbs in the middle if you're not quite sure. Thumbs down if I have lost you. Okay. Again, if you need help, you can stay, and at the end, I'll be more than happy to help you. All right. Awesome. And remember, this works not just for language arts, but for all of your classes. And we just need to do one emojis, guys, okay? So another thing we talked about in 1.01 are signal words. And this should be pretty familiar to you guys, but signal words, text connections can compare things, meaning that the items are alike, or they can contrast things, meaning that the items are different. So signal words are words that are letting you know the text is going to compare or contrast things. And this is right from your lesson, you guys. All this information I took directly from 1.01. So you have this chart in your lesson, and it might be a really good chart to put in your notes when you go through and read 1.01. Okay? And they're comparison words and contrast words. Or you can even print them out and put them in your folder for language arts. You should have a notebook for language arts and for each of your classes where you have information, where you keep all your notes together, because remember, on DBAs and on exams, you can use your notes. So I want you to be taking those notes down and going back and being able to review and learn from those. We want you to master the material. So some of your comparison words, both, comparatively, each, much as, same, similar. And then your contrast words, although, despite, nevertheless, on the other hand. Okay. So these are all comparison and contrast words that you can look at. We are going to give a brief overview of 101 and 102. You are still expected to go back and read the lesson and take the notes on your own. But I'm just kind of giving you an overview so you know what's coming up this week. Now, some of the material gets a little more complicated. We're just starting out this week. So 1.01 is kind of a general overview, and 1.02 gets in a little bit more in theme. But if I'm pulling out this information as main things to go over from the lesson, when you read the lesson, it would probably be a really good idea that you know your comparison words and your contrast words. Okay, so you might want to write those down or print that out. Writing things down makes you remember better. So I want you to do handwritten notes. All right. Give me a smiley face if you do handwritten notes. No one? Kaylee, Joey, Daisy, Elijah, thank you. If you don't do handwritten notes, I want you to start now. Okay? So start doing handwritten notes now. And you know what, you guys, when I do my handwritten notes, I use all sorts of different colors. And I make it colorful because it's just more fun for me. Remember, your notes need to be for you. Okay? Devin, that question I can answer at the end. I'm not quite sure about you being behind, okay? All right. Analogies. Hopefully this is a review. If not, let's talk about analogies. Writers use analogies to make text connections and clarify ideas for the reader. In an analogy, writers will compare a familiar idea to an unfamiliar one by comparing several items from the two groups. It can be a one sentence or a short paragraph. One sentence. A one-sentence analogy uses two sets of items from two groups and connects the ideas using words such as is, to, and as. A short paragraph. You can write an analogy over the course of a short paragraph or explanation. Okay? Analogies like or as. My 8th graders are as bright as the sun. Okay? That's an analogy. I could also do a whole paragraph on how bright you are and how that you're like shooting stars. So that's when you're making text connections and clarifying. Okay, questions on analogies. Give me a smiley face if you've heard the word analogy before and you understand what it means. If you're looking at this and you're like, oh my goodness, I've never heard of that, then you need to go back and make sure that you're reading the lesson. So it's really important if this is unfamiliar to you, or if you just get a vague idea of it, that you go back and you need to put the work forth, read the lesson, and take the notes. Okay? Yeah, it's very similar to a simile. Similes and metaphors go along with analogies. Okay. So the key things that we've looked at so far from 1.02, or 1.01, excuse me, comparison, analogies. So we talked about our signal words to compare things. We talked about analogies. And now we're talking about close reading. This is really important because a lot of our quizzes and exams for language arts are more of a reading comprehension where you have to read a passage and give an answer. So when you do that, you need to practice close reading. And I think you guys naturally do this, but let's just kind of review what close reading is. So it's identifying text connections, not just reading or skimming the text, but really doing a close reading of it. So it's a careful, purposeful reading of a text. You want to practice CPR, which cracked me up last night as I was writing that. So CPR, the first thing is careful. So when you read, you want to do it carefully. That's your C. You are thinking carefully and deeply about the text as you read, not just looking at the words. So that's really important, you guys, is that you are not reading it while the TV's playing in the background and your brother and sister are fighting and you're checking your text messages. Okay? When you are reading school material, you should be thinking carefully and deeply about the text as you read, not looking at the words. The next thing is purposeful. You are reading for a particular task or purpose or goal, a question you need to answer, or an idea that you need to respond to or understand. And that's why we did our guided questions in the beginning, our objectives, where we turn those into questions. And what that is purposeful. So you're reading to answer the questions. Okay. And then the next thing is rereading. Yes, to understand informational text, you must read it more than once. That's why we really stress that you're reading your lessons a couple of times. So you need to read it more than once. Think of a story you know by heart. You probably know every little tiny detail about it and can argue points with friends because you have read it many times. Rereading makes you notice more and helps you understand text better each time. So to be successful in not just language arts, but in your classes for Lee Virtual and going forward, you need to do close reading because the text and the material is difficult. So it needs to be careful, purposeful, and you need to reread and take notes. So really, really important, okay? As my big 8th graders now, almost high schoolers, it's important that you really take your time and you focus on what you're doing for those grades, okay? Questions about close reading? All right, thumbs up if you're good with that. If you have never done close reading, you need to start now, and if you need help with it, let me know. Okay, so let's take a look at the connections between ideas. And again, guys, I got this right out of 1.01, and it kind of reviews connections, and it goes back to those objectives. You want to have your comparison, your signal words. I'm going to put on off the chatting for a minute so we focus. You want to have your comparison signal words, also and as well as both can be compared. Your contrast words, although, conversely, despite, different from, then. Your analogies that connect two ideas. And categories, two or more items placed in one group. Okay, so that's how you make connections between ideas and text. And again, you guys, I want you to make sure that you're going through 1.01 and 1.02, reading it closely, doing that CPR close reading, and then taking notes. So now what? So say that after we've gotten off the live lesson, you go back and you read 1.01 and you take your notes. So what's your assignment? You want to read the lesson, finish the activities in the lesson, make sure you go back and you answer your objective questions. And then you want to go to 1.01 and complete the quiz. And you want to go do that through Gradebook, not through assessments, but through Gradebook to submit the quiz. So why is it important? Why do I want you to go through Gradebook to submit the quiz and not assessments? I did turn the chat back on. So why do you want to go through Gradebook and not assessments? Daisy Joey, correct. Okay, you want to go through Gradebook. No, it's in assessments too, but you want to go through Gradebook because if you need to retake a quiz, you do it through Gradebook. So I want you to get in the habit of going through Gradebook to do all your assignments and your quizzes. Okay, so you go through Gradebook and then you submit the quiz. So let's say that I go in and I take 1.01 and I don't do as well as I had hoped for. What are the steps for retaking a quiz? So what are the steps for retaking a quiz? Yay, Joey, reread the lesson. McKinley, good. Go back to reread your notes. Add to your notes. Look at the questions you missed. Good. Go back through the lesson. Excellent. Reread. Good. You guys have it. I don't want you to just click and retake the quiz because that's not going to help. What you need to do is you need to go back and reread the lesson, add to your notes, and then retake the quiz through Gradebook. Right. Remember, you can retake it up to 3 times, but I want you to make sure that you're going back and rereading the lesson and looking at the notes each time. Thumbs up if we're good with that. Awesome. Okay, so 1.02, we're not going to go into detail on 1.02. I want you guys to work on that one on your own. But I did pull up the objectives on 1.02, and it's about theme, which should be a review. So the 3 objectives for 1.02 is identify theme, identify how theme develops through character setting and plot, identify topics that determine themes. How can you rephrase the objectives into a question? And then use the questions to guide your notes for the lesson. So Joey jumped right in there, and how do you identify theme? Good. How can you change the other 2 objectives into questions? Oh, there's 31 of you in here. Come on. Good, Caitlin. How does theme develop through character setting and plot? Good job, Kara, Sophia. What about identifying topics that determine theme? How do you identify topics that determine theme? Awesome. Good job, Ty. So now, when you go through 1.02, that's what I want you guys to do. I want you to make sure those objectives are turned into questions to use for your guided notes. And then you'll complete 1.02 on your own. Remember to read all the information in the lessons. Click on the videos and pictures. Go through everything. Take handwritten notes. Use the objectives as a guide. And then you're going to go to Gradebook to take the quiz for 1.02. So by Friday at 4 o'clock, you have 1.01 and 1.02 done, and then you're on pace. So here are some reminders. In a minute, I'm going to give you the Google form, and you need to fill that out in order to get credit for your lesson, for attending the live lesson today. The link will be in the chat. Collaboration will be after attending 3 live lessons. So we'll look at collaboration at the end of September. I know it's the first thing in the grade book, but just ignore it for right now. Make sure that you are following the pace chart. All right. Live lesson next Monday. Oh, that should be at 1 o'clock. Sorry, you're at 1 o'clock, guys. You're always at 1 o'clock, my 8th graders. That's 1 o'clock, okay? So you're at 1 o'clock next Monday, always on Mondays, same time and place. Grace period ends next Friday. Please be on pace and passing in all your classes or you may be withdrawn. So next Friday the 31st, really important that you're on pace and passing. And if you need any help, please call or text. Questions. Okay, here is the link for the attendance. So go ahead and fill out the attendance form, answer those questions. And if you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and go. If you have questions, then you may stay. Okay, if you're really ahead, that's fine, Katie. If you're super ahead, you don't need to necessarily attend the live lessons unless you're struggling with something. Okay? So if you're really live ahead, you don't need to attend the live lessons. But remember, you need to go ahead and, when it comes to the DBA, is call and make an appointment for a DBA, book a DBA on GenBook.